Chapter 4. The truth was, other studies had by this time overshadowed the St. Gall expedition, and it was principally the keen interest Tish had developed in the thing that now revived it in my mind and led me to make the necessary journey. I was going to the old cities of Nimes and Arles anyways, and it did not seem difficult to swing around through Switzerland. St. Gall is hardly a place of much tourist interest, and consisted, I discovered, of little but the old conventional buildings, a huge mass of quadrangles with an enormous church and a tiny library. The library, in fact, was housed in two small rooms. The most prominent object in it was an Egyptian mummy, reverently placed on trestles in the center of the larger room. I had never seen a library thus adorned before, and ventured to express some surprise to the custodian, a very obliging but not highly educated woman, chiefly occupied with dusting the premises. She admitted that the mummy was an unusual library feature, but explained that they valued it because it was given the library by Napoleon Bonaparte. I could not remember his ever having given anything else away, and I too began to feel the mummy's unique significance, and soon came to respect, if not actually to enjoy, its proximity. The rooms were so small that with the dusting custodian, the Napoleonic mummy, and myself, the place was positively cozy. Still, I did miss Tish as I began to turn over the quaint and precious manuscripts of St. Gall's. The saint, it appeared, was a medieval Irish prince who, on pilgrimage to Rome, fell sick at this spot, and on his recovery founded this monastery. This must have been some time in the 8th century, when Irish culture was running high. He eventually became quite a saint, it appears, for one splendid cursing Colophon I came across runs thus: "This book contains the epistles of St. Paul. Hartmodus, the abbot, gave it to St. Gall. Should any take this book from high St. Gall, may St. Paul gall him, and St. Gall appall." Very good company, I thought, for the curse of the 318 holy fathers who assembled in Nicaea, though it still lacked the chief feature of that imprecation, that it was pronounced upon anyone who read it was written below. It took some hunting to disclose the particular manuscript I was after, and when I found it, it gave no evidence of any special distinction. Its binding was commonplace, and its contents and style were quite ordinary. In a good deal of excitement, I confess, I turned to the closing pages and sought the all-important Colophon, wishing most of all that Tish might have been there to see what turned up. I found the text, followed by a series of paragraphs in various hands, the last of which was the one I was looking for. It stood at the foot of the last recto, nearly filling out the page. The forbidden words must then be on the verso, and I eagerly turned the page. There was nothing there. The last verso was blank. There was nothing written below. I felt decidedly abashed by this discovery. If it could be so described, I had not fully realized how much I had expected from seeing the manuscript. I had expected, I hardly knew what, but something certainly, and to find simply nothing staggered me. It seemed to leave me in a void, with no way to turn. I asked myself what I had supposed would follow the cursing paragraph. Perhaps a magical formula of some sort, or just some heretical dogma distasteful to the scribe. But that could easily have been erased. Perhaps he had seen this himself and erased it from the verso after having written his curse in the recto. No, the verso was smooth and unruffled. Nothing had been rubbed from its polished surface. I compared the previous recto to make sure. There, a fresh surprise awaited me, for the surface of the parchment under the imprecation was decidedly roughened, as though something had been rubbed out before the curse was written in. Was this then the meaning of that curious written below, which had brought me all the way from Chicago? Had the scribe first erased what he objected to, and then written over it with his elaborate curse upon anybody who should read it? But they couldn't read it anyway. Why had the curse to deter them? It went too far. Something frightfully secret or sinister must have lain in that lost underwriting. Perhaps that was it. It was a secret, not heresy or magic, but a plain, honest, dead secret. Dead indeed, I reflected as I stared blankly at the mysterious lines. Well, what secret of the forgotten past could possibly have lurked in the demolished lines? What possible secrets had those old monkish chaps to keep? Their main concern would be books, manuscripts, old writings. Some of them were pious, some were bookish, but most of them, no doubt, cared chiefly for the safe refuge in a troubled world. But how troubled? What was the world of this scribe whose old fingers had penned this tremulous curse? When had he lived and written his few lines? The thing was fairly dated. There was no difficulty here. The month of October, the 12th day, the year 1492nd, the year of the discovery of America, and the very day too, October 12th. The times this old fellow must have been rough ones for his kind of people. His youth might have seen the fall of Constantinople and the looting of its treasures. Perhaps he had witnessed the capture of the city. He might have known the fate of the great library. Possibly he had seen it pillaged and scattered. Its magnificent purple parchments, with their countless miniatures by the finest Byzantine papers. What a glorious show they must have made, unequaled in the world before or since. Gibbon could laugh over the destruction of the Alexandrian library, but only a barbarian could smile over that of the Byzantine. But couldn't they have prevented it? Even if they thought the city might fall, were there no steps they could have taken to smuggle out its treasures to safety? Or after the capture, was there no way to save any of it? Some of it certainly survived in Constantinople itself and right in the hands of the Turks. But it was mostly the poorer part of it. What became of the richer part, the part that made all the manuscript libraries seem meager in comparison? Did it shift through to the convent libraries of Mount Athos? Or go with the Greek refugees to Romania, where so many of them went that it came to be called after them the Roman country? They did not all go empty-handed. So I mused and pondered over my disappointment. Well, I had simply drawn another blank, as fishermen, gamblers, and manuscript hunters so often do. Simply charge it off to profit and loss and forget it. There seemed no other course. But how disappointed Tish would be. How could I break the news to her? I could not. I squared my shoulders and prepared for another onslaught upon the obstinate problem. Once more, I ran through the lines of the paragraph, turning each word over like a stone to see what, if anything, might lie beneath. The date, that was all right. The curse, regular enough in form, except for the object it was directed to. The luckless reader of the writing below. The writing below. The idea came back to me. That might mean the underwriting, not the afterwriting, but the underwriting. Something written underneath the colophon, something over which the curse had been written. By Jove, the thing was written over an erasure. I had noticed that myself. Was the curse on anybody who should, by some unimaginable means, decipher what was rubbed out? Where the scribe had written his curse of his? But how did he know what had been there? He must have rubbed it out himself, and then pronounced his curse on anybody who ever dared to read it. But wasn't that just the way to get people to try to read it? Well, that depended on the kind of people that saw it. One kind, of course, would be deterred by superstitious fears from trying to read it, but another kind might be attracted by these very precautions to make the attempt. Could he have foreseen that? After all, he lived in the tremendous 15th century, in the days of the revival of the classics, the invention of printing, the discovery of America, and the circumnavigation of the globe. The ancients were not half as stupid as we moderns easily assume. At any rate, something must have been done about it, even though it might lead to nothing. We must read the underwriting. What was it Tish had said about those clever Californians reading palimpsests by some fancy kind of light? Ultraviolet, wasn't it? No use to look for such a light at St. Gall, but how could I possibly get the manuscript away to a place which might have one? I broached the subject tactfully with the custodian, who was busily dusting the other room. Did they ever lend their manuscripts? Oh, but certainly not. Never to other libraries even? Well, possibly if some great library asked for the loan of a certain manuscript for a week or two, it might be sent to a library, but never to any individual. I began to think rapidly of the foreign libraries that I might hope to cajole into borrowing the manuscript for me. My letters of introduction, to whom were they addressed? And would any of these people be likely to have an ultraviolet lamp by which the underwriting could be read? The thing took some thinking over. I could see that. I must first find a place where my letters would get me special privileges, and then select one which might possibly be blessed with such a lamp. Then the manuscript might be borrowed by that library, and then... A vision rose before me of Tish's head bending eagerly over the fatal page by ultraviolet light. Not generally considered a very becoming light, I believe, and still the picture attracted me strongly.